April 11, 1955. Alt-Glienicke Chaussee, West Berlin. Night air gathers like fog against corrugated steel, and a single warehouse door groans open just wide enough to swallow a truck. The headlights blink once, then die. Inside, the gloom is dense with oil, damp timber, and the faint metallic bite of fresh-cut pipe. A man in a wool cap, Royal Engineers captain on paper, Mr. Harvey, to the Americans, taps his wristwatch. You can hear the second hand over the silence because everyone is holding their breath. The floor looks ordinary, scuffed from pallets and crates. It isn't. The false deck lifts, and the smell changes. Earth, wet and mineral, a smell that belongs in fields and riverbanks, not a city. CIA Officer Bill Harvey, the real Harvey, leans over the edge of the square black mouth and whispers to the first crew, "Go." They descend into light that flickers off steel ribs and rubberized sheathing. The shaft walls glisten, lined with shoring that gives just a little when you touch it, like breathing skin. Each rung amplifies the quiet clink of tools. Above, the truck door rolls shut, and the city noise becomes a far-off tremor. The tunnel face is a semicircle of sandy loam, sweating water. Berlin clay is treacherous, sandy, water-laden, prone to slumps. And this is no ordinary dig. The plan is impossible on paper. A 1,476-foot drive from this warehouse, angling precisely beneath the border and down under the Soviet sector to reach a nest of armored communications cables. The British call the effort Operation Stopwatch. The Americans call it Operation Gold. Here, tonight, it is simply the line. A small electric cutter, wrapped in rubber skirts, starts up with a muffled hum. Its teeth chew the face delicately. A dewatering pump thrums, sending a trickle up narrow hoses to a hidden cistern. The ventilation whispers. Every sound is wrapped in padding, every vibration measured by fingers on the wall. The crew works by routine. Advance the face by inches, shore with curved steel sets, lay plank. Drag spoil into sealed bins on rubber wheels, winch back to the shaft. No coughing, no drop spanners, no chatter. Above, Soviet patrols pass within earshot on gravel boots. Somewhere on the other side of the city line, a Red Army dispatch rider kills his engine and lights a cigarette. Harvey crouches with a transit, aligning the laser against a mirrored sight fixed to the rib. The angle is exacting. The margin for error is measured in inches, not feet. A U.S. Army engineer named Jack, he uses only the nickname, checks the gauge on the vibration monitor. Acceptable. The wall lamps show condensation purling on cable spools. They are building a machine that will listen, a mechanical ear that must attach itself to live Soviet nerves without the heartbeat of a host ever changing. By the second hour, the tunnel has moved forward a body length. Gloves blacken, faces streak with mud, and the air tastes metallic, like the inside of a battery. A crate opens. Inductive tap housings, sealed in gray, cans that look like something a submariner would trust. Another clerk checks the humidity, then the power draw, then the silence again. You feel the pressure of the city, trams, boots, the lingering thunder of the last war, bearing down through soil and steel. You feel the line you're crossing without crossing it. Someone whispers, "Listen." A rumble comes through the earth like distant thunder. A train on the Soviet side. The men freeze, hands still, breath shallow. The rumble fades. Work resumes. And the tunnel takes another inch. None of them know the truth that walks above their heads in daylight. Across the channel, an amiable MI6 case officer named George Blake has already told the KGB about this tunnel. Before a single rib was bolted, before this first inch of earth was taken, the plan lived on the other side. And still, the order from Moscow Center was patience. Let them build. Let them hear. Feed them what we want them to hear. Down here, at the edge of impossible, the crew advances unaware. The line is perfect. The tap chambers are waiting in their crates. The cables they seek hum with orders and ration totals and convoy times. The warehouse door above seals the night with a final click. A city holds its breath. June 1955. Same warehouse, same breathless ritual. The tunnel has grown into a steel-ribbed artery, 1,000 feet long and inching toward a precise grid where Soviet armored cables lie in clay the color of weak tea. The air is cooler now, drier, ducting hums with a steady confidence. And along the wall, a chalk mark counts the days since the last shift flooded. For days dry. A miracle in Berlin soil. Stop there. The British foreman, a tumbler from Kent gone to war twice, touches the face with the back of his knuckles. It's not the feel that tells him, it's the sound. The cutter's tone changed, softer, damped. Ahead is a cable trench, an underground boulevard in miniature. Multiple lines, lead sheathing, pressurized casings. The team powers down to a hush, so complete the ticking of a wristwatch seems like a hammer blow. The cable team moves up. U.S. Army Signal Corps techs in rubber-soled boots carry gray cans no bigger than lunch pails. Inductive taps, no cuts, no breaks, no flicker on the Soviet end. They open a panel the size of a bread loaf and slide out a cradle lined with felt. Fingers like surgeons ease away damp clay. A red stencil appears on lead sheathing. Cyrillic. One whispers the translation like a prayer. Army Command Circuit. From the moment the first tap clamps on, the tunnel changes. A low, living hiss enters the chamber, the sound of speech traveling. The line runs through the tap, up a bundled umbilical toward the shaft, into racks waiting behind a false wall in the warehouse office. Recorders blink to life, labeled reels, synchronized timestamps, translators on 24-hour rotations upstairs with headphones clamped, pencils sharpened, ashtrays full. Hold pressure. A British engineer checks the tap housing seal. No leak, no rattling harmonic. Everything has to be silent to the cable, invisible to the far end. In the Soviet sector above, a clerk passes a message to a lieutenant colonel, who dictates a reply without knowing 2 services and 2 languages away. A woman named Ruth in a press blouse is mouthing the words as she writes them down. The first transcripts are mundane. Vehicle allotments, depot inventories, pay rosters. Then the lines deepen. Orders of battle, alerts, rail car manifests, fuel status for armored divisions. You can watch a regiment move on paper before the boots ever squeak on a platform. The room upstairs becomes a map that draws itself. Pushpins, colored yarn, arrows penciled, erased, redrawn. The analysts begin to trust the wire more than street rumors. Phone taps can change a war, someone mutters, and is shushed as if speaking too loudly could carry down the cable. But beneath the triumph is a thread the crew can't see. Some messages are curiously polished. Numbers reconcile too neatly. A readiness report contradicts a rail manifest in a way that isn't accidental. It's curated. The KGB's second chief directorate has a metronome on this line, and Moscow Center is playing both silence and sound. Not every call is staged. Not every order is salted. That's the brilliance. Real gold mixed with fool's gold until even the assayers argue. In the tunnel, the second and third tap chambers are cut with the same reverent care. Moisture traps hum. Desiccant cartridges are replaced on a schedule nailed to the wall with a carpenter's pencil. A young CIA officer named Jim marks the rib sets with a grease pencil, A through H, so that if the evacuation ever comes, the cable clamps can be found in the dark by touch. They should all be sleeping more, but no one wants to miss the moment the lines begin to sing. One night, a scramble warning ripples through a district HQ, late and brief, canceled within half an hour. Upstairs, pencils scratch hard enough to tear paper. Was it an exercise? A test for the tunnel? Or a KGB pebble thrown into the stream to watch where the ripples show on the NATO shore? Down below, the crew logs it with the same neat handwriting they use for pump maintenance. They do not editorialize. Their job is the ear, not the brain. Outside, Berlin is lit in puddles, checkpoint bulbs, tram stops, the neon of a dance hall in the American sector. In the Soviet sector, a sentry warms his hands around a tin mug and thinks of home. He does not know that his colonel's voice has just crossed under his feet and been caught by strangers in the dark. He does not know a British officer he will never meet betrayed the plan months ago, or that his own counterintelligence chiefs have chosen not to shut it down. By autumn, the intercept racks hum like a beehive. Thousands of reels. The warehouse has a smell now: ozone, paper, tobacco, damp wool. The tunnel has a pulse. And above ground, a photographer in a black sedan takes a picture of a man leaving the building at dawn. The picture will be filed with others under a KGB case number. The game is running in both directions, and no one has called time. October 1955. Rain needles the warehouse roof. The shift clock flips to midnight, and with it, the engineers begin the ritual that makes skeptics into believers. The cutter is silent tonight. No more advancing the face. The tunnel is finished for now, ribs numbered and logged, chambers sealed like ship bulkheads. This is not a dig anymore. It's an instrument. Power check. Jack from a U.S. Army engineer leans over a panel tapped into a clean circuit disguised as a boiler feed. Needles ease into the green. The British foreman nods and runs a gloved finger along the seam of a tap housing, feeling for the tiniest kiss of air. Nothing. A signal core tech tightens a cable gland by a quarter turn. Somewhere far along the line, a Soviet clerk picks up a handset and says his name into the void. Upstairs, the analysts with the lines like headphones into another world. Ruth translates at speed, left to right, Russian to English, pencil tucked behind one ear. Fuel issue: 24 tankers. Destination: Karlshorst. She doesn't look up as the tape reel reaches its end with a soft slap and is switched for the next. A British liaison, hair damp from the rain, numbers the spool and hands it to an archivist who slots it into a wall of metal drawers that now needs a ladder to reach the top. On the map, the British officer moves a pin. Engineers had been told it couldn't be done in Berlin clay. Now pins moved because of clay that never gave them away. Critics had laughed. They'd said you couldn't rip a secret artery out of the Red Army's body without it screaming. They'd said the soil would collapse, that the pumps would whistle, that a Soviet vibration meter would twitch, that a work crew would wander into the wrong place. Yet on the other side, nothing stutters. Telephones ring. Typists type. The Red Army's nervous system hums, oblivious to the steel stethoscope pressed gently against it. In the tunnel, the rarest sound is laughter. It comes like a cough, quick and guilty, when one of the British sappers, face-smeared cap askew, tries to drink tea and mud in the same breath. They muffle it against sleeves. Silence is doctrine. Every tool is wrapped, every walkway padded, every hinge greased. Even the air is managed. Humidity is held in a narrow band so that a drip doesn't fatten into a telltale patter. The dewatering wells pulse like sleeping lungs. The tunnel is alive but taught to dream quietly. Messages spool out long enough to tell stories. A battalion's mail delivery is late because a bridge west of Frankfurt under Oder is out, and the unit's morale rating drops a half point. A colonel dictates an address to his wife outside Smolensk, and you can hear the softening in his voice. Then, hard edges. A readiness report for a mechanized division that contradicts a previous fuel status by exactly one trainload. Upstairs, an American analyst circles the number and frowns. Too neat, he says. His British counterpart shrugs. Neat doesn't mean wrong. This is the paradox they live inside. They know some of what they hear is salted, curated to protect a man they do not know by name. A man who has put all of this at risk before it even began. But not all of it is lies. Not even most of it. The Soviets cannot make the real world conform to a theater script every hour of every day. Trains leave when they leave. Tires wear. Boots grind out at a rate you can hear in a quartermaster's complaint. Truth sneaks in because reality is noisy. At dawn, the rain thins to mist. The warehouse door opens a slit to bleed off heat, then closes again. A truck backs in, pretending to deliver crates of machine parts. Under a layer of actual machine parts sit Deskin packs and spare taps, each stamped with a serial the quartermaster tracks in a ledger that would make no sense if found. Down below, a small chalkboard lists maintenance tasks. Replace sump filter. Inspect rib F3. Check sealant on chamber 2. On the Soviet side, a maintenance crew receives an order to inspect an underground junction months from now, a note logged with a rubber stamp, and a signature that means nothing to the clerk filing it. The date is far away. The city will pass a winter before then. The tunnel will collect another mountain of voices. The KGB will wait. Outside, Berlin is morning gray and cautious. A woman buys bread that tastes faintly of yesterday's smoke. A GI drives past in a deuce and a half, whistling a tune from home. The canal smells of diesel. Somewhere east, a man named George Blake walks to work with a paper under his arm, the rain beating on his hat. He does not hurry. He has already done what he came to do. And because of him, the line between triumph and trap is drawn so fine that only later will they see which side they stood on. The taps are live. The city is listening to itself. And under the damp earth, the ribs hold like the bones of a secret that believes it can last forever. January 1956. The warehouse breathes winter. Coal smoke folded into cold air. Damp will steaming off shoulders as men shrug into their shifts. Down the shaft, the tunnel's temperature is steady. A cocoon against Berlin's ice. The pumps pulse, the fans whisper, and the tap housings gleam with a thin sheen that catches lantern light. On a clipboard wired to the wall, the collection tally has outgrown its columns. Reels are numbered into the 5 figures. The beehive upstairs never sleeps. Message priority 2. Repeat priority 2. Ruth's voice is low even as she transcribes. A Soviet logistics officer discusses tank transport timings. Then a quiet aside about shortages in a specific depot. It fits last week's grumble from a quartermaster who sounded too tired to be performing. On the wall map, the web of colored string aches with tension, stretching from switchboard markers to rail yards to airfields. Here, in paper and pins, NATO's picture of the group of Soviet forces in Germany sharpens into something you can brief without flinching. Yet the sharper the picture, the more it gleams. That sheen can blind. An American analyst catches himself trusting the line more than his own skepticism. It's clean data, he says, then bites the inside of his cheek. Clean is a dangerous word. Beside him, the British liaison thumbs a cigarette he doesn't light. We're not the only people reading this line, he says, softly enough that the words feel like they're not meant to touch the air. Below, Jim, grease pencil Jim, walks the ribs by habit, checking his marks like a man counting prayers. He stops at chamber 3 and listens, head cocked. Not to the hiss, that's constant, but to the tunnel itself. Settling? No, just the earth complaining the way it always does. He notes a bead of moisture, wipes it away with a cloth, then tightens a bolt until it sings the right note. Everything down here has a music you learn in your bones. The crew has names for their superstitions. If a real box splinters when you open it, you don't lay a new tap that shift. If your tea goes cold too fast, you recheck the pump seals. If the cutter oil smells burned, though the cutter has been idle for months, you stand very still and listen for the city. Tonight the city is quiet, the kind of quiet that makes you think snow is coming. Above, it begins to fall soft, heavy flakes that swallow footfalls and make the border lamps into halos. Across the sector line, in a building where the radiators hiss like snakes, a Soviet counterintelligence officer initials a memo scheduling a maintenance dig for spring. The location is precise. The timing is not urgent. The instruction passes through hands without eyes lingering. The officer knows the tunnel exists. He knows it must end, but not yet. Not until the metronome at Moscow Center clicks its last needed beat. The paradox tightens. A readiness drill ripples through a division, broadcast on circuits the tunnel hears, and the Soviets know the tunnel hears. Is it a real drill? Yes and no. The men climb into vehicles. Engines turn. The schedules are adhered to without the messy irregularity of reality. Upstairs, an analyst feels the neatness like a draft across his neck. They're teaching us, he says, teaching us to expect this cadence. The British liaison, finally lighting his cigarette, exhales toward the ceiling and watches the smoke fold into the ventilation. Then we should learn something they don't intend to teach. In the shafts between day and night, the tunnel's rhythm never varies. Pumps on, fans on, temperature set, humidity trimmed. A desiccant cartridge pops as it's replaced, the sound like a knuckle cracking. Signals flow. An East German political officer complains about slackness in a guard company and orders a surprise inspection. A Soviet colonel dictates rail priorities that edge an artillery regiment closer to immediate readiness than last month. A clerk misspells a surname and corrects it, initialing the correction with a tiny flick of pride that rides his voice. Truth rides along with lies because truth is lazy. It doesn't always know when it's being used. On a night in late February, a faint tremor runs through the tunnel that's not on any instrument. The men feel it in their boots. It's the city's heart kicking against its cage. A week later, a woman on the translation team brings in a newspaper folded under her arm. A story from the East, small, bland, about infrastructure upgrades and routine maintenance along a set of lines no civilian would care to know. She lays it on the table and taps the date. Spring, she says. Spring is a word shaped like a promise and an ending. The reels keep spinning. The pins keep moving. The briefings go to desks with flags on them. Praise comes back down like snowmelt, cool, cleansing, dangerous if the river swells too fast. The engineers downstairs do what they have always done. Grease, tighten, listen. The secret is not the tunnel. The secret is that it cannot last. Outside, winter thaws into a wet, reluctant March. The canal smells like iron. The border lamps flicker with the damp. And somewhere in a file with blue edges, the maintenance digs date is inked in for spring. Not immediate, not hasty, planned, posed. A queue waiting for a curtain. April 21st, 1956. Rue de Chaussee, Soviet sector, East Berlin. Morning comes gray and wet, the kind that slicks cobbles and turns dirt to paste. A Soviet work crew unloads shovels and crowbars from a rattling ZS truck at a marked point in a flat, weedy lot. The foreman unfolds a crease plan, taps a square with his thumb, and grunts. Routine maintenance, says the order. Check a junction. Replace nothing unless necessary. A military photographer lights a cigarette and lingers where a good angle will be, down and left of the pit. On the other side of the line, the warehouse wakes as it always does, switches, hum, a rush of cooler air down the shaft. In the tunnel, Jim runs his palm down a rib and feels the comfortable vibration of the pumps through steel. The hiss in the tap housings is a whisper in a chapel. Everything is normal. He notes a moisture bead, writes down the time, tucks the pencil into his sleeve. Across in the lot, the first shovels bite. The earth is cooperative, soft from rain. A spade rings off something that isn't stone. The worker frowns and scrapes carefully. Another joins, then another, crouching. Dark metal curved. The foreman squats, brushes away mud, and looks up to the officer overseeing the crew. The officer nods once. The photographer stubs his cigarette under his heel and raises his camera. 2 boards come up, then a third. A cavity yawns, too smooth, too deliberate. The air that rises smells like rubber and work and foreign sweat. A hand lamp drops in and sketches ribs in yellow light. Somebody swears. The officer produces a handkerchief and wipes his mouth. Soldiers arrive. Faces set in a practiced blend of surprise and severity. A jeep idles. A journalist's notepad appears, as if from nowhere, as if tipped by the breeze. In the tunnel, the sound reaches as a change in pressure more than noise. A breath drawn the wrong way. Jim looks toward chamber 2. He doesn't hear shovels. He hears the earth listening to something else. He walks fast, but not too fast because speed makes noise. He puts his ear against steel and feels the hint of draft that shouldn't be there. A tug as faint as a fish against a line. Upstairs, an analyst hears a telephone ring he's never heard before. The one that's supposed to call only when nothing can be done except tell the truth fast. He picks it up, a liaison on the other, and speaks softly, crisply, as if describing the weather. They've opened a pit, he says. They found something. Back at the lot, the pit widens. The mounted lights throw hard shadows. Gloves reach down and haul up a length of cable shroud. It's cut showing neat felt lining. The foreman shakes his head like he can rattle free an answer. Soldiers pose beside the hole with their expressions stapled to their faces. The photographer clicks, rewinds, clicks. A microphone appears. The officer gestures at the junction box, the ribs below, the obvious and undeniable fact that a tunnel has reached under their feet. The British call this an accidental discovery, the way a theater calls a cue accidental when the director is standing in the wings with stopwatch. In Moscow, somewhere a metronome stops ticking. Here, the play goes up. A spokesman calls it an outrage, a violation of provocation. He uses words ticketed for newspapers. He points at the camera, then the hole, then the city, then history. Down below, Jim moves with the economy of a man inside a burning house who knows he has one armload to take and chooses carefully. He kneels at the first tap housing and checks the clamps. There is a drill for this. He unfastens what is designated to be unfixed first. He looks at his grease pencil marks, A through H. He has rehearsed closing his eyes and finding each by touch. He doesn't close them now, but he could. Evac. The word comes down the shaft, flat with control that sits on top of adrenaline. The pumps must run until they must stop. The fans must whisper until the last man is at the ladder. The taps, some of them, can be pulled. Others must be left to tell no stories with their removal. Upstairs, hands move to files and boxes. The map strings are cut with tiny snips that sound loud as gunshots. Outside, the press moves closer, angling for the shot that will run tomorrow and be archived forever beside the word American. East German officers add their indignation to the performance, their accent sharp, their fingers tight on hat brims. A soldier holds up a tangle of cable like a fisherman with a catch. The camera loves him. In the frame, he is proof. Out of frame, he is a boy going home hungry. In the warehouse, Ruth slides the last reel off its spindle and labels it with hands that don't shake because she won't let them. She looks at the wall where the drawers go from floor to ceiling and feels a tenderness for metal and paper so strong it hurts. She wants to keep the room the way it is, humming like a hive, forever. Instead, she reaches for a box and begins to pack. In the tunnel, at Chamber 2, Jim makes the choice that will stay with him. He leaves the housing sealed and lays his palm against it once, like a farewell. He takes the tools, the notes, the scrap that could be read as more than junk. He looks down the curve of the ribs toward the face where the earth sweats and understands that the tunnel is always an hourglass. He has run out of sand. The soldiers above shout to one another with the innocent profanity of men whose lines are being spoken for them. The officer takes off his cap and wipes his brow for the camera and speaks of sovereignty. The crowd that wasn't there a minute ago is there now. The coup de theater lands. The tunnel was theirs all along, the Soviets say, and the world nods at the picture. Even those who know better nod because a picture is louder than a whisper. In the warehouse, lights go dark by plan, not panic. The door lowers and locks. The street returns to the sound of tires in wet and the thump of a distant tram. The line, both the physical line beneath the soil and the invisible one between triumph and trap, goes slack. April 22, 1956. Dawn lays a pale band over West Berlin, and the warehouse smells like a place after a storm, cleaned, emptied, haunted. The shaft is sealed. The racks stand bare except for indentations where real boxes lived. On a workbench, a wrench rests where a hand set it down with deliberate care, as if to tell whoever finds it that nothing here was abandoned in fear. Upstairs, the last briefing is not a briefing. It is a reckoning. The pins are gone from the map, but the pinholes remain, constellations in cork. The analysts sit with mugs that have cooled into rings on the table. Ruth reads from a final transcript that came in just as the lights began going out. A transport officer arguing for more tarpaulins. The ordinariness aches. She closes the folder and places it atop a neat stack headed for storage that might never be opened by anyone who was here to make it. A liaison from London arrives with the look of someone who knows he is late to a funeral but cannot skip the obligation. He is careful with his words. The operation's value is not voided by discovery, he says, politely sidestepping the bruise forming beneath the politeness. Someone asks, did they know from the start? He answers without blinking. We are examining that. It is the only answer he can give and still keep his own voice from cracking. Down in the Soviet sector, the pit is now a platform. Soldiers take turns leaning on shovels, while officials repeat phrases for different microphones. The camera returns to the same angle again and again, making the truth obedient to repetition. The KGB has achieved the trick every conjurer envies. Make your audience complicit in the illusion. The accidental discovery is staged so well that even the stagehands admire the craft. In a plain room far from cameras, an East German stenographer types a dictated note about the tunnel. He does not know he is writing coda to a piece whose opening bars were composed by a man named George Blake a year before the first cut into clay. In time, long after the city is split by concrete and wire instead of chalk and lamps, it will become known that Blake told Moscow Center everything, that the tunnel was compromised from conception, that the KGB let it live for months for reasons both cold and human, to shield their mole and to bend the line into a pipe that could carry their lies as easily as our truths. In 1956, the Americans and British do not yet hold that knowledge in their hands. What they hold are reels and summaries and the muscle memory of a tunnel that taught them to listen with their whole bodies. They walk past shelves that feel suddenly like a museum to a war that isn't over. Someone says, "We learned more from this than from any patrol." Someone else says, "About them or about us?" The question stays in the air unanswered, because isn't it the kind of question you can button into a file? Jim takes one last turn down the ladder, because leaving fast would be wrong. He steps onto the tunnel floor and hears it as it is for the first time, quiet as a tomb. No pumps, no fans, no breath. The ribs creak once, settling. At chamber 2, he touches the seam he left sealed, a gesture halfway between apology and benediction. He scratches his initials the size of a match head into a painted rib where no one will ever see them unless they come looking with a lamp and patience. Back topside, the warehouse door rolls up and light slants across the empty space. A truck reverses in, this time carrying real machine parts for a real factory order. The building is going to be itself again, unremarkable, a place you would forget as soon as you passed it. That is the point. The men step out into a street that smells of bread and exhaust and thawing canal water. The American GI with the tune in his head has learned a new one, the rhythm of a project ending without applause. Across town, George Blake signs a document and tucks a pen into his pocket. He is an unassuming man with a bland smile and a gift for convincing others. He is precisely what he appears to be. He will not be unmasked for years. He will sit in rooms where people discuss the Berlin Tunnel's legacy and nod in sympathy at the right moments. He will be the reason some of those moments were scripted in advance. In briefing rooms behind thicker doors, the reckoning becomes professional. What was true in the take? Most of it, analysts insist, because reality is cumbersome to fake at scale. Where were the seams? In the readiness drills, too neat by half. In the rail priorities that always arrived with the timing of a lesson plan. In the numbers that reconciled like sums in a textbook. The verdict is a paradox. They were fed, and they feasted. They were deceived, and they learned. The shock wears into something more durable. Realization. Not the cinematic kind, but the administrative kind. Written in policy and training and new checklists. If a line can be curated, build systems to detect cadence where cadence shouldn't be. If a feat can be mirrored by an enemy's patience, assume your triumph has made you a target for theater. The tunnel becomes a case study, its ribs replaced by bullet points, its damp replaced by chalk dust. One afternoon in early May, Ruth walks back to the warehouse alone. The door is locked. She stands with her palm against metal warmed by a sun that has finally decided to be spring. She thinks of the voices that passed under this threshold like river water. Men worrying about tarps and fuel and mail and wives. She thinks of the day when someone will pull a file and read the words Operation Gold and imagine it as a story with a clean arc. She knows better. It is a map of crossings. It is mud and breath and the sound of a train through soil. It is a secret that did what secrets do when they are good. It changed what people thought they knew. And what secrets do when they are great. It changed how people listened. Back in East Berlin, the pit is filled. The press has moved on. The picture remains. The city continues to divide itself into stories that make sense to the teller. Under the streets, other cables carry other voices. Somewhere, men begin to plan a wall.